What's up, everybody? This is Austin Davis. I'm here at my home studio in Nashville, Tennessee, in my little garage, playing my drums, and I'm here with Worship Online. In the first video, we're gonna be going over some of my favorite drum parts, songs that I've been blessed enough to get to record and play on over the years, breaking down songs that are some of my favorite drum parts, and some that people have told me are their favorite drum parts. Just letting you into my thought process a little bit. Also, throughout this video, we're going to be using some of my new samples from my signature drum sample pack with drum sample shop. And in the second video, we're gonna do a little producer breakdown of me behind my computer and just breaking down how I would incorporate some of the loops that I've recorded into demos, into honestly even final productions of just like taking some of the stuff that I've created and some of the parts that I gravitate towards that I've recorded with this sample pack and working them into your song, especially helping out worship leaders and songwriters, people who aren't drummers or don't have the ability to track drums. This is a simple way to add drums into your demos or into your original songs. If you want access to the second video, just click the link below in the description and enter your email. Let's get started. So as we're jumping into this, I just wanted to give you guys for reference. This is my kit that I play at home all the time. I also take it on the road, my Franklin drum kit and my Ludwig snares. But all the drums in this video are going to be these actual drums, but also enhanced with my samples from my signature sample pack with Drum Sample Shop. For reference, I'm gonna give you just a snapshot of what it sounds like with just my mix processing, kind of raw drum sounds, and then what they sound like with the samples mixed in. Cross has the final word. This is a really special song. This one is by Cody Carnes. Obviously, most people know that. Kind of one of his first songs that he put out that when he started his career, and I was touring with him at the time. Just a really special song to get to play live and has a lot of energy and is so powerful. I kind of want to just break down some of the process that I had when writing the parts and also just some of the like kind of song story about how it came about. Cody sent us this song. He sent us this demo. We were on tour and he sent us this demo of him playing piano and was like, man, we've never heard any song like this. Like, this sounds crazy. And he's like, I think this is really special. And he brought it to the band and we were literally playing that night in like an arena. And it was like, I want to play it tonight. And he had just written it like the day before, which is pretty classic Cody fashion when he's pretty excited about a song. And so I remember we were having a band powwow before and we didn't know how to play the song necessarily. We were just talking through chords and I was like, I don't really know what we're supposed to do with this song, but I think maybe the second chorus is just a build. And that feels weird, but I think that that's what it is. And then I was like, at some point we should do big smashes on one of the choruses. I think the song just felt so open. It didn't feel like it really called for a groove, at least on the choruses. And so those were kind of my suggestions, which then ended up kind of sticking in the song. The part that everybody really remembers the most is the bridge. And that's the part that most people have come and talked to me about or DM'd me about. I'm like, dude, the cross has the final word. That's the first time I like noticed you on the drums or whatever. And so it's been a really fun song to talk to other drummers about. Kind of my thought process behind this song is it's such an open song. The lyrics are very minimal. There's a lot of space in the music. The chords aren't moving a ton. And so my approach is really just thinking like not to do too much, which when you get to the bridge, that sounds like a hilarious idea. But I definitely knew that the choruses need to stay open. So when we're working through the song, we ended up kind of like, we played it that night and it went okay. We thought it was like pretty strong. But then we workshopped it as a band a few days later in a sound check, and I was really in this headspace at the time. I can't remember exactly what year it was, but of like listening to these like indie rock bands that had these drummers that would play very complicated parts, like bands like the Local Natives and the National, where they had these like kind of tight drum sounds where they were playing really busy stuff, but they weren't hitting it super hard. And that was really kind of the approach to this. That's what I was really inspired by the time. And so I think because I felt like the chorus was so open and the drums needed to stay minimal, that the bridge was this opportunity to do something really special. And honestly, in any song that I'm writing parts for or playing on, I'm really trying to weigh what the identity of the song is. And sometimes the identity of the song is the hook. It's always the lyric and always the hook of the vocal, but sometimes it's like, what instrumental identity is it? Is it a hook from the piano or the guitars or even bass, I guess? Or is this a moment for the drums to really do something that's like kind of special for that song, something that really stamps it and gives it its own thing and sets it apart? Especially in worship music, there's a lot of songs that sound fairly similar. Just like any genre, there are so many songs that sound similar. So my thinking was like, this is an epic song. I knew what Cody brought to us was very special, that it was going to do well in church. And I really wanted to try to make, as like, for lack of a better term, like an iconic sound or like a stamp on the song that gave it like an anchor of like, this is something people know is going to happen. Anyway, the bridge part of this was kind of born. We worked it out. I knew I wanted to do something kind of busy, and then the approach, just like in any part I'm writing, and you'll see throughout this video, especially on bridges or just long arcs throughout songs, I'm trying to figure out how to milk the build as long as possible. And so this part was really like thinking through how many bridges there were, what I can add to each bridge, so every section of this bridge grows. So let me just kind of break down my thought process on how I built this bridge. Even though the drums are very kind of intense and busy, I felt it really important that the velocity of the drum is actually very quiet for a long time, but still has some energy. I'm obviously not whispering on the drums, but kind of like those bands I was telling you, they play these intense parts, but it's real dry sounding and really tight. And so at the top of it, there's an instrumental. There's no kick drum at that point of the groove, and it's just kind of playing it all pretty softly and trying to keep it as concise as possible. It's busy, but it's not like overly busy. There were definitely a lot of tendencies I had to add more hits, and I remember in the studio when we were working on it, Cody kept being like, no, just leave it. Like, us drummers always want to add more, do something that's more impressive, but I think restraint, even in this like busy part, was key, so that the audience also isn't just like staring at you and being like, what's the drummer doing, having a moment, really making it just part of the song and like nobody thinks anything different of it. So at the beginning of it, I play the groove without kick drum and I'm playing pretty quiet, kind of like this. As you can see, I'm playing it. I'm not doing any rim shots. In fact, I try not to do any rim shots until the very end of the bridge, just playing the center of the snare and keeping that just kind of quiet momentum and just building this like tension, because we've got a long time to build. There's 4 bridges. Once the vocal comes in, it felt like it needed one little notch up. So then I added the kick drum in like this. So another thing I'm always listening for is vocal cues. As a drummer, it is our job to pay attention to the vocal cues, to listen to their velocity of how they're singing, how they're leading into the next section. Especially in worship music, it's so dynamic that we have to be able to like follow that. And so I knew Cody was gonna jump up in energy there. And so it's my job as the drummer to also match that. I'm playing kind of quiet, even though I'm adding in the kick drum, but the next level is like, I'm gonna start playing louder and bigger. And then I'm also gonna go 4 on the floor on the kick drum, because it just felt like too long not to. I'm also going to add in a backbeat on the snare because it felt like a nice pickup into the next section. And And then for the last part of the bridge, obviously this is the biggest part. This is kind of the like send it home kind of thing. And we've got to get to the massive smashes while maintaining this. And I'm such a fan of playing parts, even if they are complicated or they're polyrhythms and they're not just straight builds like jum, 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 jum. I'm also like trying to think, how do I keep this rhythm going for an entire build? I want to keep, like I was saying, if I'm doing something that I feel is signature to it, or like in like cinematic music or in movies, they would call it a motif. I kind of try to think of drums like a motif as well. So if there is a pattern of any kind for a section, I try to keep that running all the way through, at least until the bridge is done, if not through the entire song. So this one was like, well, kind of the natural thing would be maybe when the song is at its last bridge or something, that I should straighten it out and just go do, 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 do. But I just didn't feel right about that. And it felt like I needed to just keep adding to the pattern. And so that's what the last bridge is. What we're gonna do is we're gonna double up on the kick, which is just like an easy add after going 4 on the floor. Then maybe you go 8. And then I'm gonna add in more snares on beat 4 with a crash as well. And then halfway through, I'm gonna add in my ride on the downbeat, which is kind of where it gets complicated. And the only reason I added the ride and worked it into the pattern is because when we tracked this in the studio, I actually did the ride as an overdub. And I just loved having that one little tiny like high-end add to it. So I just figured out how to play it live, and somehow it kind of works with the pattern. Yeah, I'll just show you how I played it. So then after all that busyness, all that loud stuff, the only thing left was really to go back to the simplicity of just the smashes. It was like having all that 16th note energy just pent up to release to this massive open chorus, and really weighing contrast like that. I'm constantly thinking about contrast when I'm writing parts of like what's gonna build the most tension. And then when the next section comes, it's like not drastically different, but it's like a scene change. Just in everything I'm doing, I'm trying to think about whether it's just like switching cymbals or switching from hi-hat to ride or whatever, just all those sorts of things just help the listener and help the moment, help the song hit that much harder if the dynamics shift like that. And so to me, the next move was to go to the smashes, which was honestly, when I heard the demo, just my first instincts. So I played the smashes for one chorus and then it's a repeat chorus. Yeah, and then the last chorus, it felt like the appropriate thing to kind of straighten it out and play a groove. Just get rid of all the tension and just groove it out. And it felt like a time to like kind of land the plane there and play the song out. That's sort of how the song came about. All right, take you at your word. So this one is by far the one that I get the most comments about, the most questions about, DMs about, the most people sending me videos of them playing it at their church, which I love. Super cool. Yeah, it's just one of the funnest songs to play live. And we're currently playing it on tour all the time. It's just one of the funnest ones. It has so much energy. And I knew from the second that I heard the demo that it was gonna be a fun drum song. This feel is so unique. And so it just invites so many creative ideas. So I'm just gonna kind of walk you through what I was thinking while writing some of these parts. So the drummer's tendency is to maybe always try to play the busy thing or the thing that the subdivision is begging for. So in this case, it being like a 12/8 time signature, which is essentially 4/4 with a triplet accent, or all the subdivision is triplet. I naturally want to play all those triplets, like do 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 do, because the synths are doing that, like all the arps are doing that, the guitars are doing that, and it's just such like a big intro. And I'm like, when we're sitting in pre-production for Cody's album, there was so much excitement behind this song and like what it could be dynamically. When I came out the gate, I went with that. The drummer's like initial approach of like, yeah, I think it's gonna be on toms and I think it's gonna be hectic from the top. So my initial thought was to be like, just playing every bit of the triplets in the song, at least in the big sections, all the turnarounds. And I quickly discovered that that was going to bite me in the butt in the end. It also sounded very sloppy. I found that it was really hard to play. The listener doesn't feel this way when they listen to it. It's a perfect tempo, but as a drummer, it kind of sits in this weird in-between tempo space that actually feels slow, at least for my muscle memory. It always feels like you're having to sit back in it, and it's so easy to want to rush this song. Because of that, it just naturally started to get sloppy. And anytime you're playing something that has 4 on the floor and the kick drum, and you're keeping like snare as well with the kick, then you also have the tendency to flam quite a bit. And most drummers don't even notice that they're doing it, but every drummer struggles with the kick and the snare being hit at the same time. It's something that I'm constantly working on and being aware of. So obviously that wasn't going to work anymore, and I quickly realized that I was running out of stamina, like before I even got to the bridge, which ended up being the most difficult part of the song. So somehow I landed on like, well, maybe like the mature move is just 4 on the floor and emphasizing like big tom hits and then building it with the snare as the song goes. It didn't feel as good energetically as the drummer, but I got to co-produce this song with Aaron Robertson, and so once I kind of got off of the kit, listened to a bounce of me playing it this way, I realized, oh, this is actually the best way to do it. It had the most space, it didn't overtake everything. And sometimes when all the other instruments are playing that subdivision, the drums don't need to do that. And vice versa, if the drums are playing really busy, maybe the guitars and keys don't need to play all that subdivision as well. So that ended up kind of being the direction for the beginning of the song, which honestly worked out in my favor because it being a lot more simple at the beginning makes it a way more approachable song, and then also allowed me to get to do something a bit more intense and, for lack of a better word, like scary in the bridge, to try something new. The beginning is just that approach of like 4 on the floor and then playing the toms, do 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 ba do 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 do. And like adding in that snare backbeat really helps a lot. And then after chorus 1 in the turnaround, it felt like appropriate to add in another level of that because I had been playing like the kick and toms the whole time. It felt like really appropriate to add in that constant backbeat on 2 and 4 with the snare by the time we got to the turnaround, because it just, you need that next level. If you kind of play the same thing for too long, the audience, without even realizing it, starts to get bored, or the person listening to it starts to get bored. Now let's take a look at verse 2. This is a really fun part, one of my favorite parts to play live. It's a bit more creative. It involves every drum that I have here. Involves the side snare, which is something that I've become like, I've really added it to my rotation. Obviously not everyone in their church has 2 snares or even like lines for 2 snares in their sound system. And I also added this 18-inch floor tom to my setup on these records as well. And it was really just to give me more creative ability to add new sounds and textures. So something that I started doing was on verse 2, kind of drops out and then it comes in, and I really wanted to incorporate the side snare and the main snare, just really like using both of them. It didn't feel appropriate to just use this, so I kind of do this thing where I'm going back and forth from high, low, high, low, high, low, and then emphasizing these tom hits with the snares in between all the vocals. Something that you'll notice is that, you know, he sings, "Your word is a lamp unto my feet," and then the drum motif happens, do ba boo boo ba boo ba boom boom ba. And then every time his vocal comes in, it goes back to being very simple and just 4 on the floor and kick drum. And that's super intentional, kind of like I was talking about before in one of the last songs, about making space for the vocal, not playing over the vocal, really trying to lean into what supports the vocal the best. And right there, it felt like just playing the 2 snares and then doing a little fill in between really helped accentuate those kind of down moments. If I had not played that little tom fill in between, it would have been okay, but it would have been a lot less interesting. So here's kind of how I approach verse 2 from top to bottom. So yeah, that's how I approach verse 2. It felt like a really fun, creative way to kind of have a simple part while he's singing and then kind of accentuate a little fun thing, use all the drums that I have at my disposal in these little holes, and then adding in the kind of classic 12/8 hi-hat subdivision. That felt like an appropriate time to accentuate that, really doing that like everybody wants to rule the world kind of groove, which when you play this kind of song is just begging for that sort of hi-hat thing. It can definitely be difficult to play with a single hand, and I really worked really hard at playing it tight and to playing it well. And I will say, just as a blanket for this whole song, I in no way did any of these things come natural. I had to work really hard at making sure that I played this song right, and for a very long time it was very not tight, and pretty much all throughout our pre-production I was just barely hanging on of all this, and I was hoping that when we did the live recording that I would play it well, and it turned out well in the end. But just an encouragement, this is a hard feel to play for any drummer, and so everybody's crushing it. After that, it felt really appropriate to just go right back into the tom groove that we were doing. That seemed like kind of the main groove for the song, but with the backbeat constantly on the snare, kind of going back to what was happening in the turnaround before that. That just felt like the right thing. It didn't feel right to like open up on the crash quite yet. For some reason, the energy felt about the same there. So really the next time that the groove changes is right after the chorus into the turnaround. And up until this point, it's been 4 on the floor the whole time. And this felt like a perfect moment in this turnaround instrumental to kind of switch up the kick pattern, to kind of allude to those triplet feel things and just like have a dynamic shift in the song and just kind of get away from that kind of constant kick thing. And it goes to a more open ride kick and snare groove like this. All right, now for everybody's favorite part of the song, which is the bridge, which is the most exhausting part of the song to play. And pretty much every time I play it, I get a little bit nervous that I'm gonna mess it up, but it usually comes together. Parts-wise, the top of this bridge, I remember when we were working on it, this part felt like a no-brainer to me. It felt like, I remember it just like happened. We just played through the song once, and kind of my initial reaction, because I knew the melody was this bum, 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 ba, 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 ba. So my mind just goes like, this is my shot to like really jump on this melody. It felt like the beginning of the song, I really wasn't following the melody a ton. I was kind of just like laying a foundation, but this felt like a cool dynamic shift and like going back to toms, but really getting the 4 on the floor out and just like accentuating those triplet hits. So because it came naturally to kind of go to that, I started there, and then like I've said in other songs, I'm like, well, I want to keep this as the motif for the bridge, but how do I build this appropriately? And it felt like it was pretty difficult. I remember it was very sloppy for a while. I was just like sorting it out. So I started to kind of just like work through the ideas. So at first it kind of starts with just toms, and I kind of incorporate all of them. You don't need to have 3 toms to play it, but I play it because they're there. So I'm like, why not? So it's really this like and I didn't do just like, you said your love will never give up. I didn't play every single hit exactly the same as the melody, because that also can be a bit cheesy, but like giving just enough of the melody, but then also adding maybe a couple little embellishments. So like boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. It feels a little bit more cinematic and musical than just playing the exact melody, because that can be cheesy, like I said. And then the next move was really to like add the snare, obviously. So before I even go 4 on the floor, we're gonna add the snare just like this. So the next half of the bridge is where it really felt like I needed to take it up a notch. Obviously, I've said every section we're trying to take it up a notch, but keep the same motif as best as we can. And so I kind of kept the exact same thing going with the toms and the snare, but this time with the snare, I'm adding in crashes on some of the hits. They're not all just flams every time. And then I'm also adding 4 on the floor on the kick drum. So So then the last element of the bridge build is the kind of the part that everybody dreads or wants to try to play correctly, including myself every time, the part that I get nervous about. I don't even know if I could fully take credit for writing. It was really like we were playing it through in our pre-production. I remember it was like, it came to this part and I was like, I don't know how to take the build to the next level. I was in this like kind of wrestle between keeping the motif, but like it really feels like the build needs to like straighten out, but then doing just like a dum 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 like a quarter note or eighth belt felt wrong to the time signature. And I remember just being like, but I can't play all the triplets, like that's physically impossible. And I remember the band guys, I was very active like asking the band and Aaron, the other producer, what would work. I was like, I feel like this needs to go to the next level, but I'm kind of stuck as far as the build. I was like, I could try to play all the triplets, but I was like, I think that's humanly impossible. And they were like, no, you have to play the triplets. Like, that's the only option. That's the only next level. And so I was like, okay, well, how do I figure out how to do that? That is humanly possible, at least for me. And it felt humanly possible to do all the triplets with my hands and then keep 4 on the floor on the kick drum, like keeping that straight. But then the next section, I remember the move was really going to be just playing all of them as like blast beats, essentially, with my kick snare and like crash. What happened was I accidentally stumbled upon this thing that is now the part as like an accident. And then they were like, yeah, that has to be it. And that was like the bounce we listened to, the rough mix that we listened to from pre-production. And they're like, yeah, you have to play it exactly like that, which was really just like an improv and like a me like accidentally doing something that sounded cool, which a lot of music creating is that way, especially in the producing process. There's so many things that like you misplace and then you're like, that actually sounds cooler than my original idea. Like this thing ended up being more creative than just playing all those hits. That's kind of the journey of how that came about for that next section, and really made it possible to play because I'm actually taking my foot off every time that the snare is accent to save my leg, but it's still hard to play, but also very easy to kind of mess up the feel. That's kind of the journey of how this part came about. Yeah, I will do my best to demonstrate it. Yeah, so after that, I feel like you're home free if you made it through that part. I usually feel this like sigh of relief because it just drops to 4 on the floor. There's a couple fills in there to just like kind of keep the hype and excitement of the moment. And then it builds right back into the chorus, which in the chorus we're playing pretty much the groove that we played on the instrumental before, but it's 4 on the floor on the kick drum. It just felt like, okay, now it's time to get off the toms. It's time to just like ride it out. Big crash, snare, and then the instrumental goes right back to the same groove that we played on the instrumental before when we're doing the tags. The very last part of the song, which is the outro, where we do the big kind of hits and there's kind of like a weird time signature change. A lot of like us are kind of like trying to find our bearings during that part. We know it feels really cool, but we don't really know what's going on. Kind of the story behind how that came about was that wasn't actually in the original demo or the arrangement. We didn't plan on doing those hits. We were in pre-production and we were finally settling into the groove, for lack of a better term, of like how the song was gonna go. And it was really just gonna end there on the one, take you at your word. And that was gonna be the end. Just in the moment, like while we're recording it at pre-production, I like had this idea to be like, take you at your boo. And I just started playing that, like these like hits, and the band, because they're all really sick and we had great synergy, they kind of just jumped on. But I think we were just playing like, you know, probably the same chord over and over, probably just like the one chord. But it was like, oh, that was really cool. Like, what if we made a moment out of that? And it was really just like me goofing off. And then it became like, well, let's actually like add chords to that. And so it kind of became like, let's play these changes. And so in the middle of it, it kind of keeps the same triplet feel, like boom. And then right there, not because I necessarily meant to, the time signature kind of changes from 12/8 to 4/4. And I think that that's where a lot of people kind of like their mind gets confused, because it is confusing. It sounds kind of crazy, which is why I think it sounds really cool. But it was actually, it came natural to me in the moment. That was another one of those things that we just recorded at pre-production, and the guys were like, you have to play it exactly like that. Like Cody memorized all the drum parts and was like, you have to play it just like you did at pre-production. So I had memorized it, but it was really just like a in the heat of the moment thing that became the outro. And so what happens there is that it kind of switches from triplet feel to just like a straight boom, boom, da da da, boom, ba boom, 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 boom. Boom, which I'll demonstrate for you really quick, but just kind of wanted to show you and share with you how that came about and how sometimes happy accidents, like just embrace those things, and sometimes you get the coolest creative things from just like accidentally trying something that seems kind of odd. So now I want to jump to something that I'm super excited about. I want to take a look at dropping some of these loops that I've created with Drum Sample Shop in my signature pack and dropping them into demos that you're creating for your original songs, kind of my process of what I would do if I was producing a demo and how I'm thinking about building the drum parts and how simple it can be. So if you just click on the link below in the description, we'll jump to video 2. See ya.